Hi everyone, I am here with what was that? With a true short story. This is a new chapter we're starting. God winks on family. Now there's a little saying that goes with some of these stories, and I like to read them first because the story goes on and I don't like to stop during the story to read it. This one is by Theodore Isaac Rubin, MD. Kindness is more important than wisdom. The recognition of this is the beginning of wisdom. Okay? And this one is called Fostering Faith. Come on, kids, let's get going. We want to get there before dark. Laura Sadlevar was ushering her 3 older children, 11, 13, and 15, and her 3 younger foster children, 8 months, 1, and 4, into the 8-seater SUV for a week's camping at Ferrystone State Park near Martinsville, Virginia. Emerson, can you carry the baby's bag, please? She shouted the good-natured command to her oldest son, while aiding the younger ones along in carrying 1-year-old Dion, the foster baby whom she'd grown to love like her own since he was 3 days old. Come on, everybody's got a job. Seasoned by her own service in the U.S. Navy, where she and Carlos had met, fallen madly in love, and married 15 years earlier, Laura was commanding her own small army on their way to a long-talked-about summer vacation. Unfortunately, Carlos had to stay behind in Virginia Beach to work. Laura and Carlos were ideal foster parents, deeply committed to their faith. They had a heart for children who were victims of society's underbelly, children who came under the Child Protective Services Division of the Virginia Department of Social Services. For 7 years, CPS social workers knew they could call on Laura and Carlos in the middle of the night, and they would always open their arms to children who needed to be sheltered. They knew they could call me, and I'd always say yes, said Laura, anticipating the next question. Take care of them 24/7, but don't bond too much. Those are the orders. You gotta stop right there for a minute. Take care of them 24/7, but don't bond too much. Those are the orders. You cannot do that. It's not possible unless you're cold-hearted. You cannot take care of a baby, a child, 24/7 every day for months or years possibly. Some of these have these kids for years. They grow up, newborn, 1, 2, 3, 4, grow up 15 years old, and then they take it away. That's your child. You raised that child. How can you not bond with them? They told us, when I worked in a nursing home, they told us the same thing. Don't bond with the residents. Don't get close to them. It was impossible. It was impossible not to. You can't be with them every day and not, get close to them. It's sad. For several weeks prior to the camping trip, however, she and Carlos had seriously been talking with the foster care social workers about adopting Dion, the 1-year-old. Having found it impossible not to bond with this adorable child, arriving at Ferrystone Park, Laura and the kids set up the pop-up trailer tent, pulled their bikes from the carrier on the SUV, and soon were singing songs and toasting marshmallows around the campfire. Laura's own children accepted their mother's counsel to always help the smaller ones. They also accepted that there would be times when the babies would get more of their mother's attention. They all understood that the foster children came from less privileged backgrounds than themselves, and they sometimes needed more attention, she said. At the end of the second day, one of the older children, a responsible teenager, asked if she could take Dion for a ride on the bike. The girl would hold Dion, on the seat and walk him around as she had done in her own neighborhood. "Just be careful," Laura said hesitantly. But moments later she wished she'd said no. "Mommy, Mommy, the bike fell over. Dion's been hurt," cried the girl, rushing to Laura with Dion screaming in her arms. Laura's heart sank. "Oh, baby, you'll be all right," she said, cuddling Dion, soothing his tears, thinking his ankle had twisted and would soon be better. She thought she ought to have a doctor take a look at him to be on the safe side, and was directed by a park ranger to a hospital in Martinsville, 20 miles away. Doctors took x-rays and reported that Dion had suffered a twisted fracture, perhaps catching his foot in the spokes of the bike as he fell. He would need to stay overnight because hospital policy required that a child not be left alone overnight. Laura and the 5 other children bunked in the room. Laura advised doctors that Dion was a foster child, which mandated that they report the matter to the local office of the Department of Children's Services. "When there's a twisted fracture to a foster child, that's a red flag," said Laura, fully understanding why the department was routinely called. But she was not prepared for the following. Within hours, social workers came to the hospital and took custody of the other 2 foster children and ordered Laura to remain overnight with Dion. The next day, he was also taken from her. Laura cried daily for the next 17 days. Saddened by the sudden absence of children she loved, she was shocked when the social workers, who for years had praised her foster parenting, now accused her of neglect. They refused to return phone calls and avoided conversations with her. "People who knew me well were acting like they didn't know me, that I was a bad mother," she said. "Only one person stood up for me, but only in private because she was fearful of losing her job." Laura and Carlos determined that filing for adoption was their only option. Dion was the only one of their 3 foster children who was adoptable at the time, and they decided to go with proceedings for custody against the wishes of the Department of Social Services. They always end up taking the kids away that are actually in a good home and taken care of, but the ones who are actually being abused, they leave there. I watched some videos on YouTube about foster care, how they leave babies that are abused, that's been reported that they've been abused, and they just keep giving them back, letting them stay there, and then they end up getting killed. There's several videos on YouTube about that. I've watched many. Great parents here had an accident. You know, kids are always getting accidents. Just like we get in accidents. Accidents happen. They did not hurt this child. They loved this child. And they took them all away from her. That's what they do. The people who actually love the child and take care of them, they take them away. But if the child's being abused, they leave them there. They need to redo the whole children's services thing. Within weeks, they were summoned to a hearing at juvenile court. The judge patiently listened to the accusations of the DSS attorney against Laura. The charges of neglect were spelled out carefully and seemingly callously. "I had to muster all my strength not to show anger," said Laura quietly, but it was very, very hurtful to hear those words. The judge then asked Laura's attorney to testify. He detailed her history of the service she had with social services, how she and her family had opened their home to some 25 homeless babies and children over 7 years. He described the innocence of the accident that injured Dion and suggested that a far more serious injury to the child's psyche would be the child's problem of this loving family. The judge was unsatisfied. He set another hearing in 30 days to hear additional testimony from authorities in Martinsville who were involved on the night of the accident. Laura was worried. The days ticked off slowly, each a burdensome uncertainty. She prayed, "Lord, please allow me to have my baby back." At the second hearing, the judge heard additional testimony from DSS, and the painful charges of parental neglect were repeated. They said that the injury to the child proved that Laura Salvador was unfit to be a foster mother or to have custody of little Dion. The judge looked directly at the social workers and their attorney. "A few days ago, my son suffered a broken bone when he fell from the trampoline in my backyard," said the judge. "Would you come and take him away from me?" There was nervous laughter. "Oh no, Judge. He's your blood child," replied the attorney. Why does that matter, right? "So you're telling me that this mother, whose record you have testified was perfect for 7 years, would not have had this child taken from her if she was his blood parent?" They solemnly nodded, "Yes, sir." "There are many times as a judge when I go home at night wondering if I have made the right decision. Today I am confident that this baby belongs with his mother." He slammed the gavel. Laura was surprised later that evening as she stood in line at Walmart. Someone was calling her name, trying to get her attention. She turned. She didn't recognize him at first. It was the judge. From the hearing, no longer in a robe, but dressed in street clothes, he was smiling. Laura felt she could now communicate in a way she could not in the courtroom do. She went to him and hugged him. Then she pointed to Dion in the shopping cart. "This is the baby you returned to me today." She squeezed the judge again. "I felt badly that his son was injured in the trampoline accident," said Laura later, "but I wonder how things would have turned out if that God wink hadn't have happened." Would have turned out totally different, probably. She probably wouldn't have got custody of the child back. Alright guys, that was tonight's story. I know it was a little longer. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Good night, guys.